I'd been practicing the conversation in my head for weeks, like it was a monologue I had to nail in one take or the whole relationship would collapse. It always started the same way. Me, lying on my back, staring at our bedroom ceiling while Noah slept beside me. One arm flung over his pillow like he was guarding it, his breathing slow and even. The room would be dim except for the orange streetlight seeping through the blinds, striping the wall in soft bars. I'd listen to the tiny clicks of the radiator and the faraway whoosh of cars and think, how do I say this without turning him into a stranger? Because the truth wasn't neat. The truth was that I loved Noah. I loved him in that everyday way that doesn't look dramatic on Instagram, but feels like home in your bones. I loved how he made coffee without asking what I wanted because he'd learned it. Oat milk, 1 sugar, cinnamon if we had it. I loved the way he touched my shoulder when he walked past, like a casual check-in. Still here, still us. I loved the way he listened when I talked about something that mattered to me. Really listened, like he could hold my whole mind in his hands without dropping it. And the truth was also that sometimes, when we were intimate, my brain wandered somewhere I didn't expect. Not away from him, not because he wasn't enough, but sideways, toward women. It wasn't a constant thing, and it wasn't a cold, detached fantasy. It had a pulse. It had curiosity. It had the kind of longing that made me feel like I'd been holding my breath my whole life without realizing it. Sometimes it would be as simple as remembering a girl I'd kissed at a party in college as a joke, the kind of thing people laughed about afterward like it was harmless. Except I remembered it differently now. I remembered the way my skin had lit up. I remembered thinking for half a second, oh, that's something. Other times, it was less about any specific person and more about the idea of being with a woman as myself, not as a dare, not as a story, not as a performance. It was about wanting to know what it would feel like to be fully present in that desire instead of filing it away as irrelevant. I told myself it was normal to have fantasies. Everyone did. Noah probably did. But mine started to feel like a secret I was carrying through the house, something that made me smile at him and then immediately feel like a liar. What made it worse was the part I didn't want to admit. I wanted more than thoughts. I wanted permission. I wanted to hook up with a woman, just once maybe, just enough to answer the question that kept tapping at my ribs. And then the shame would flood in, hot and familiar, because I knew what it sounded like. Hey, I love you, and also I want to sleep with someone else, even if it was different, even if it was a woman, even if it was not the same. I could already hear the arguments I could use, and the fact that I could use them made me feel even worse. Because if Noah came to me and said, I've been thinking about sleeping with someone else, I would not feel enlightened and mature. I would feel sick. I would feel replaced. I would feel like I'd been asked to swallow glass and call it growth. So who was I to ask him to do that for me? I kept circling one thought like a vulture. If he won't be okay with it, we'll break up anyway, right? It was a tempting line because it made the decision sound logical, like honesty would simply reveal a mismatch. But deep down, I knew that was a lie I told myself to make it easier to jump. Like I could turn my fear into inevitability and pretend it wasn't still a choice. The night I finally told him, it wasn't because I felt brave. It was because I felt tired. We were washing dishes after dinner, and the kitchen smelled like garlic and lemon soap. Noah stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, forearms wet from rinsing plates. The radio in the living room was playing something soft and nostalgic. I watched him for a second. This man I'd built a life around in small pieces, and something in me snapped in the gentlest way. I couldn't keep doing the thing where I smiled through a secret. Hey, I said, and my voice came out thinner than I meant. Noah looked over his shoulder. You okay? I dried my hands on a towel I didn't need. My heart was so loud I felt like he might hear it. Can we talk? Like, really talk? That made him turn off the faucet. He wiped his hands and leaned back against the counter, giving me his full attention. His expression shifted into that serious softness he had when I was upset, Yeah, what's going on? The words crowded my throat. I almost chickened out and said something safe. Work stress, family stuff, anything. But the secret had weight. It pulled me forward. I've been thinking about something, I started, for a while. Noah nodded, patient. Okay. I stared at the tile behind him because eye contact felt like too much. It's about sex, about us. His eyebrows lifted, concern flickered. Are you unhappy? No, I said quickly, almost too quickly. No, that's the thing. I'm happy. I love you. I want you. This isn't because you're doing anything wrong. Noah's jaw tightened slightly, the way it did when he was trying to prepare for bad news. Okay, he said again, but this time it sounded like he was bracing. I took a breath that felt like stepping off a ledge. Sometimes, when we're intimate, I think about women. Silence, immediate and thick. Noah didn't speak. His face went still, like his brain was trying to find the right file. I watched the moment it landed, the moment his mind translated it into whatever his fear wanted it to mean. I rushed in, voice shaking. I'm not saying I don't want you. I do. It's like this part of me I didn't pay attention to, and now it's loud. Noah's eyes narrowed slightly. Do you want to be with a woman? My stomach flipped. This was the cliff edge, the question I'd avoided because answering it would make it real. Yes, I whispered. I think I do. Noah exhaled sharply, like air had been punched out of him. He pushed off the counter and started pacing, 2 steps left, 2 steps right, like our kitchen was suddenly too small for his body. So you're what? You're telling me you want to cheat on me? His voice wasn't loud, but it had a sting, like he'd touched something hot. The word cheat made my chest burn. No, I said, and tears rose so fast it made me angry at myself. No, I don't want to cheat. That's why I'm telling you. I don't want to do anything behind your back. Noah stopped pacing and looked at me with a kind of stunned disbelief. But you're asking permission to sleep with someone else. What am I supposed to do with that? I know, I said, voice cracking. I know it's not fair. I know it's not something you signed up for. I've been trying to talk myself out of it, and I can't. And I hate myself for even bringing it up. Noah dragged a hand over his face. So what do you want? The kitchen light hummed faintly. I could hear the radio song drifting from the living room, a chorus about love lasting forever, which felt cruel in that moment. I don't know, I said honestly. I want to be honest. I want to understand myself. I want to not feel like I'm lying every time we're together. And I don't want to lose you. Noah stared at me for a long time, his eyes doing that subtle thing where you can tell someone is trying not to drown in emotion. If I said, I've been thinking about sleeping with another woman, he said slowly, how would you feel? My throat tightened. Terrible, I admitted. Noah let out a humorless laugh. Yeah. I know, I said. That's why I'm scared. That's why I didn't tell you. He went quiet again, and I waited for the sentence that would end us. I waited for him to say, I can't do this. I waited for the look of disgust or disappointment. I waited for the door slam. Instead, Noah sank onto a chair and stared at his hands. His shoulders were tense, but his voice, when it came, was quieter. I'm freaking out, he said. I can see that, I whispered, trying not to make a joke because this wasn't the moment for it. He swallowed. But I don't know why my brain is also doing something else. What? I asked, barely breathing. He looked up and his eyes were wide in a way I'd never seen on him. Part of me is turned on. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. What? Noah's cheeks flushed, and he looked embarrassed, like he'd just accidentally said something true in public. I don't know. The idea of you with a woman, it's doing something to me. And I hate that because it feels like I'm being gross, like I'm turning you into something. My heart thudded painfully. Noah. I'm not saying I want you to do it, he rushed. I'm saying I'm confused. Because I also feel jealous and weird and scared. And then there's this part of me that's curious, and I feel guilty even saying that. The room felt tilted. All my rehearsals hadn't included this. I sank into the chair across from him. I don't want to be a porn category, I said softly. That's not what this is for me. I know, he said quickly. I know. That's why I feel weird. Because my first reaction was, what the hell, are we breaking up? And then my second reaction was, images. And then my third reaction was, that's cheating, no matter how you label it. I nodded, tears still clinging to my lashes. I don't want to hurt you. Noah stared at the table like it might give him answers. I don't want to lose you, he said quietly. The honesty in his voice cracked something in me. I reached across the table and put my hand on his. He didn't pull away. I was afraid you'd leave, I whispered. He squeezed my fingers. I'm still afraid, he admitted, but I'd rather talk than pretend it's not happening. That night, we didn't solve it. We talked until our throats hurt. We stumbled through words like boundaries and trust and insecurity, like they were fragile objects we could drop. Noah asked questions that made me wince. Was I attracted to women more than him? Was I unhappy? Was I planning to leave? Was this the beginning of the end? And I answered as honestly as I could, even when it made me sound messy. I don't know what it means, I told him. I just know it's true. At some point, Noah said something that surprised me with how vulnerable it was. I think I could maybe be okay with it if I'm included. Included. The word hung in the air between us. You mean like a threesome? I asked, my face hot. Noah nodded, looking both mortified and earnest. Maybe, or maybe just being there, knowing what's happening, not being shut out. I stared at him. Part of me recoiled, not because the idea was wrong, but because it made the whole thing feel too real, too adult, too risky. Another part of me, the part that had been secretly curious and longing, flared with a sudden nervous heat. Is that something you actually want? I asked. Noah hesitated. I don't know. I think the idea turns me on, but I'm scared it would wreck us. I nodded slowly. I'm scared too. We made an agreement that night. No rushing, no secret DMs, no impulsive decisions. If we were going to explore anything, we would do it with consent and care, or not at all. The next week was strange in a way that made ordinary life feel like it had a second soundtrack underneath. We went to work, we paid bills, we watched Netflix, we laughed at a video of a dog trying to carry a stick twice its size. But there was this new tension between us, like the air had been charged. Sometimes Noah would look at me a little differently, like he was noticing edges he hadn't seen before. Sometimes I'd catch myself watching his face when we kissed, searching for signs of resentment. We talked constantly, not in a heavy way every time, but in small check-ins that felt like building a bridge. What are you feeling today? Are you okay? Did anything come up in your head that scared you? Noah admitted he'd been oscillating between jealousy and arousal like a pendulum. It's annoying, he said one night, rubbing his temples. My brain is like, this is hot, and also, this is a disaster. Welcome to my world, I muttered, and he laughed. And the laughter felt like a small proof we weren't doomed. After 2 weeks, we agreed on something else. If we were going to do anything, we wanted it to be with someone who felt safe, someone respectful, someone who understood consent and didn't treat it like a game, and someone who was into both of us, not someone we'd manipulate into being an accessory to our relationship. The fact that we were saying those things out loud, like responsible adults planning a delicate operation, made me feel ridiculous and relieved at the same time. We didn't download apps immediately. We didn't go hunting. We didn't turn it into a mission. We just lived and talked. Then, one Friday night, we went to a friend's birthday party at a bar with dim lights and sticky floors and music that made it hard to hear. We were standing near the back, Noah's hand on my waist, when I noticed her across the room. She wasn't wearing anything flashy, just dark jeans, a fitted jacket, hair pulled into a loose ponytail. But the way she carried herself, calm, open, amused, drew my eyes like gravity. She caught me looking and smiled. Not predatory, just warm. Like she saw me and didn't demand anything. I leaned toward Noah. "Do you see the woman by the jukebox?" I asked, voice low. Noah's hand tightened slightly, but he followed my gaze. "Yeah." My heart raced. I'm attracted to her." Noah's nostrils flared like he was studying himself. Then he surprised me by saying, "Okay." "Okay?" I echoed, half disbelief, half panic. He swallowed. "Do you want to talk to her?" I stared at him. "Are you sure?" Noah exhaled. "No, but yes." That was the first time I saw what courage looked like on him. Not loud, not confident, just the willingness to stay present while uncomfortable. We walked over together. I felt like my feet weren't entirely touching the floor. Up close, she had kind eyes and a faint freckle cluster near one cheekbone. Noah introduced us. Her name was Maya. She was a friend of a friend, in town for the weekend, and she had that easy conversational flow that made it feel like we'd known her longer than 5 minutes. We talked about nothing at first. Music, work, the way the bar's bathroom lighting could qualify as a horror movie set. Noah was quieter than usual, but he stayed engaged. Maya kept including him in the conversation, which made my chest loosen with gratitude. At some point, Maya leaned in slightly and said, "Can I ask something maybe personal?" I felt my throat tighten. "Sure." She glanced between me and Noah, her expression careful. "Are you two together? Noah and I exchanged a look. "Yeah," Noah said. Maya nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm asking because I'm getting a vibe, and I don't want to assume or step on anything." My face went hot. I could feel Noah's body tense beside me. Noah cleared his throat. "We've been talking about exploring," he said, and his voice sounded like it had to crawl over gravel to get out. "But we're being careful." Maya's gaze softened. "That's good." She paused. "I'm not interested in being someone's experiment if there isn't respect. But I'm also not offended by curiosity. I've been in open situations before." I blinked. The world suddenly felt very crisp. Noah swallowed. "We're not open," he said quickly. "This would be one time, if it happened at all." Maya nodded. "I hear you." Then she looked at me. "And you? What do you want?" My heart pounded. The question was so simple, it felt like a trap. "I want to be honest," I said, "and I don't want to hurt him." Maya's eyes flicked to Noah. "And you?" she asked him gently. Noah's jaw worked. "I'm scared," he admitted, "but I also like the idea." His cheeks flushed, and he added quickly, "Which makes me feel guilty." Maya smiled, not mocking, just understanding. "Guilt happens when you care. It doesn't have to run the show." There was a long pause where the music thumped around us like a heartbeat. Then Maya said, "We don't have to decide anything tonight, but if you want to keep talking, I'd be open to grabbing coffee tomorrow. No pressure." Noah and I looked at each other again. I waited for him to shake his head. Instead, he nodded once. "Coffee sounds safe." "Great," Maya said, and the warmth in her voice made it feel like a gift, not a conquest. The next day, the three of us met at a bright cafe where the sunlight made everything look clean and honest. Noah was visibly nervous, fidgeting with the sleeve of his hoodie, tapping his foot against the chair leg. I kept reaching for his hand under the table, and he kept squeezing back, like we were reminding each other, still us. Maya was steady. She asked questions like someone who'd learned that boundaries are the real romance. "What are your rules? What makes you feel safe? What would make you panic? What would be a deal breaker?" Noah surprised me by being the one to say, "I don't want you to go off with her alone afterward." I don't want secrets. I don't want to be left out. I nodded quickly. Me too, I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. I didn't want to open a door and then slam it in Noah's face. Maya listened, then said, "Okay, then if anything happens, it happens together. And if at any moment either of you wants to stop, we stop." Noah let out a breath like he'd been holding it for weeks. "Thank you," he said, and his voice cracked a little. I felt something shift in me then, not just desire, but tenderness. This wasn't about me getting permission. It was about us learning how to speak the truth without destroying each other. We didn't rush. We spent the rest of the afternoon walking around a park, talking like normal people. We ate street tacos. We laughed. There were moments when the possibility crackled between us, and moments when it faded into something almost mundane. That, weirdly, made it feel safer. That evening, back at home, Noah and I stood in our bedroom and looked at each other like we were about to step into a storm. "Are you okay?" I asked. Noah's eyes were wide. "No," he said honestly. Then he exhaled. "Yes, maybe. I don't know." I touched his face, my thumb brushing his cheekbone. "We don't have to." "I know," he whispered, "but I think I want to." The way he said want, like it was his choice too, made my chest ache with relief. When Maya arrived later, she looked around our apartment with calm curiosity, not like she was invading. She took off her shoes at the door without being asked. She let us lead the pacing. We sat on the couch, 3 adults with racing hearts, and talked one more time about boundaries. Maya asked Noah directly if he felt pressured. Noah said no. I asked Maya if she felt like we were using her. She said she didn't, because we were listening. I remember the way Noah's hand trembled slightly when he reached for mine. I remember the way my mouth went dry. I remember thinking, this could break us. And then, right after, thinking, or it could show us what trust really is. What happened next was not a montage of perfect confidence. It was slow. It was careful. There was laughter at an awkward moment that could have turned into shame, but didn't, because Maya's presence was so gentle. There were pauses where Noah looked at me like he was checking if I was still his. There were pauses where I looked back like I was saying, I'm here. And when we crossed the line from talking into intimacy, it was with words, not assumptions, with checking in, with consent that stayed alive. I won't pretend it was simple. My emotions did weird things, little spikes of guilt, little bursts of joy, little waves of disbelief that this was actually happening. Noah's face cycled through awe and uncertainty and something like wonder. Maya remained steady, almost anchoring us. Afterward, the 3 of us sat in our living room with blankets and water glasses, like we'd just run a marathon nobody trained for. Noah looked dazed. I felt like my body was both weightless and heavy. Maya asked quietly, "How are you 2 feeling?" Noah swallowed hard. "I feel turned on," he said, then immediately looked embarrassed. "And also weird." I let out a shaky laugh because that was exactly it. "Weird because?" Maya asked, still gentle. Noah stared at his hands. "Because I love her," he said, voice thick. "And my brain keeps wanting to call this cheating, even though she didn't hide it, even though I was here, even though I said yes." Maya nodded. "That makes sense," she said. "Your brain has rules. It's trying to protect you." I squeezed Noah's hand. "I don't want you to feel betrayed," I whispered. Noah looked up at me, and his eyes were glassy. "I don't feel betrayed," he said slowly. "I feel scared of how much I liked it." The honesty in that sentence made my throat tighten. Maya stayed a little longer, then left with a warmth that didn't feel like abandonment. She hugged me, then Noah. "Be kind to each other," she said, like a blessing. When the door clicked shut, the apartment fell quiet in a way that felt holy and terrifying. Noah and I stood in the hallway for a moment, just looking at each other. "Are we okay?" I asked, my voice barely there. Noah stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me tightly, pressing his face into my shoulder. He held me like he was making sure I didn't float away. "I don't know," he whispered. Then he pulled back enough to look at me. "But I want to be." My eyes burned. Me too. That night, in bed, Noah's hand rested on my hip like it always did. But now it felt different. Not because something had been stolen, but because something had been revealed. The secret was no longer a secret. The fear was no longer just mine. We'd walked into it together and come out the other side still holding hands. The next morning, the sunlight looked too innocent for what we'd done. Noah made coffee, quiet. I watched him, trying to read his face. He set the mug in front of me. "I keep replaying it," he admitted. "Good replaying or bad replaying?" I asked, attempting humor like a life raft. Noah's mouth twitched. "Both." We spent the day talking, really talking. Noah admitted that part of him felt more connected to me because I'd trusted him with the truth instead of hiding it. Another part of him felt raw, like he had bruises he couldn't see yet. I told him I felt relieved, but also unexpectedly emotional, like I'd finally opened a door I'd been pressing my forehead against for years. And I told him the part that scared me most. I didn't want that door to become an excuse for distance between us. Noah nodded slowly. "I don't want it to become a habit," he said. "I don't want to chase the high and lose what we have." I squeezed his hand. Me neither. We made agreements again. This wasn't a new normal. This was a shared experience, one we'd revisit only if we both genuinely wanted to, and if it still felt respectful. Noah said he needed time to process. I promised I wouldn't pressure him or treat this like a bargaining chip. And then, a week later, something happened that surprised me even more than the experience itself. Noah came home from work, dropped his keys on the counter, and pulled me into him. He kissed me hard, not frantic, not hungry in a panicked way, but with this steady heat that made me blink. "What's that for?" I asked, breathless. Noah's eyes were dark with something I couldn't immediately name. "I keep thinking about you being honest," he said. "I keep thinking about how close I felt to you, and I keep thinking about how I didn't lose you." My throat tightened. "You didn't," I whispered. He shook his head slightly like he was still amazed. "And I thought I would. When you told me, I thought the ground was about to disappear." "I thought so too," I admitted. Noah brushed his thumb over my cheek. "I'm not saying I'll always be okay with everything," he said. "I'm not saying I want to do it again tomorrow, but I'm glad you told me, even though it was messy." Tears rose in my eyes, and I laughed at myself for being so emotional. I was sure honesty would end us. Noah's expression softened. "It almost did," he said gently, in my head, for a minute. I nodded. Same. He pulled me into a hug and held me for a long time. In that moment, I realized the question I'd been asking, will I lose him if I'm honest, had always been too simple. Honesty doesn't guarantee you keep someone. It just guarantees you stop living with a version of yourself that's edited for safety. And the other question, if he isn't okay with it, we'll break up anyway, right? Was also too simple. Because breakups aren't math problems. They're grief. They're bodies missing each other. They're futures that vanish. You don't get to pretend it doesn't hurt just because you can justify it. What I learned, standing in our kitchen with Noah's arms around me, was something both smaller and bigger than the fantasy of permission. Sometimes the relationship you're afraid to lose is the very place you can tell the truth, if you both decide to be brave enough to hear it. And sometimes the truth doesn't lead to a clean yes or no. Sometimes it leads to a third thing, a messy, human, negotiated intimacy where nobody has to disappear to keep the peace. I don't know what our future will look like forever. I don't know if we'll ever do something like that again. I don't know exactly what label fits me, and I'm done trying to force one to make other people comfortable. What I do know is that Noah and I walked up to the edge of something dangerous and didn't push each other off. We held on. And the thing I thought would destroy us, the confession I'd been rehearsing like a death sentence, ended up being the beginning of a different kind of trust. Not perfect, not effortless, but real.